Guess who's back? Guess who's married? I have been gone from this channel for about a year. Wow. And a lot has been going on. I mean, I had the wedding, I got a new job, I got another new job. You'll have to forgive this setup as well. This is not where I normally film, but I have a lot going on right now. And I'm also going to do another video soon about what I'm doing with this channel, and that includes some fun new stuff, some new ideas that I want to try. But the truth is, there's really only one reason I haven't posted a video since April. There's a reason that I filmed videos in October and then didn't edit them or post them. But the main reason I haven't been doing much with this channel is because I haven't been writing. After the wedding, I bounced around between a few different projects. And I'm just gonna real quick take you through the status updates of every project that I've mentioned on this channel. So here's the state of my writing. First of all, I want to thank my critique partner who I actually met through this channel, who reached out to me on Twitter having seen some of my YouTube videos. Thank you so much. He read a draft of the superhero novel, gave me some really useful feedback, and that was exactly what I needed. But that brings us to the superhero novel, which I have been working on in some form or another since 2013. Actually, technically it's based on an idea I had in college, so a very early version of it started in 2008. But in its current form, it really started in 2013. And it is intended to be a 5-book series, and I have known that I needed to have that whole series outlined before the first book saw a lot of eyes because I am a very susceptible writer. And I spent a lot of time last year and for the past couple of years working on the outline for the entire 5-book series. And while there are some things in there that I really am proud of and some things that I would love to do in the future, I have never really been super happy with how the actual manuscript was coming along. I got some wonderful feedback from my critique partner, and I think that that was helpful in a lot of ways in improving some elements, but there are other elements that I just couldn't get it where I wanted it. And I don't think that's going to change, especially based on the amount of time I've put into the book so far. I will do a different video getting a little bit more in detail about what was going on with the book and the various reasons that I decided to set it aside, because it's never just one thing, but I have trunked the superhero series, and it is the right decision. And actually, I decided that probably in September of last year. But what about the other books? Well, you might remember that a few years ago, I worked on a fantasy novel that I was referring to as the Wizard novel, and I ended up shelving it for a few reasons. I do want to do something with that at some point, but now is not the time for it. It's something I'm going to keep tinkering with, but as a back burner project mostly. And again, I'm going to do another video about that as well. That'll be its own separate video. But for now, the most important thing is that that is not the novel for me to write right now, so I am shelving that one. Now, there are some other stories that I've discussed on this channel as well. I think most chiefly was the library novel, which I trunked pretty quickly. I think I trunked that as I was writing it because it just wasn't working. Not to say that it can't be salvaged, but I don't have any plans for that one right now. Basically, if it's a story you've seen me talk about on this YouTube channel, it's either been shelved or trunked. But what about the projects that I didn't tell you about? Well, during the past year, I bounced around between a bunch of them, and there were different things that I wanted to try, different stories I thought I was ready to tell, or I had ideas for. Let's talk about some of those now. The first was a scripted dramatic podcast, and the goal was to tie it actually into the superhero novel. But even setting aside its connections to that, even setting aside the fact that I've trunked the superhero novel, the scripted podcast itself, I spent a good deal of time on. I was actually writing script pages for the podcast for like 3 or 4 weeks, about 500 words a day. But after all that time, I just could not get the tone right. I knew kind of what I wanted to do with it, but I couldn't find anything that made it satisfying for an audience. I couldn't find anything that made it unique. So ultimately, even though I could separate it from its connections to the superhero novel, that scripted podcast, that idea for it, just wasn't going to fly. No pun intended. I do at some point still want to do a scripted podcast. I think it would be a ton of fun and a project that I could do really well, but I don't think that particular idea is going to work. And having spent almost a month trying to make it work, I can say that with a fair amount of confidence, I think, at this point. So then I moved on to another project, and this is the one that I actually was planning to do for NaNoWriMo last year. I shot a few YouTube videos in October last year, planning to sort of relaunch the channel, and they were all sort of focused around this book being my next big project. I called it Project A, but now I'm going to refer to it as the time travel book. Just like the superhero story, it was going to be a series of books for middle grade audiences, but I wasn't planning to have it be quite so strict and limited. It was going to be more, well, each book will be its own thing. More Animorphs than Percy Jackson, I guess. And again, this is an idea that I'd had for years, but hadn't done anything with. So finally, I started fleshing out the story, and I wanted to have a really diverse cast. Now, you may have already realized the problem here, but I didn't at the time, until I was actually trying to figure out the story for this first book. Can you figure out what the trouble is when you have a very diverse cast in a time travel story? Yeah, it turns out that time travel is a straight white guy fantasy, and not really a fun fantasy for everyone else. So pretty quickly I realized that the tone was not going to be what I wanted, so I didn't really get that deep into it before I realized that was a pretty fatal flaw in the book. Now, someone could absolutely do a lot of really interesting stuff with that. I'm not saying you can't do a time travel story with a diverse cast, but for the tone of book that I was wanting to write, that combination of story ideas didn't work. So ultimately, I set that one aside as well. But this year, over the past few months, I have been dusting off a bunch of ideas that I've had, and one of them was going to be like a short story. And I sat down, I was like, you know what, that's a good one for me to start with. I'm going to just outline a little bit of what could happen. And I realized very quickly, oh, this is like a novel. I have a novel's worth of ideas here. Now, we'll see when I end up actually writing it whether I'm right about that, but I feel like right now there's a lot of rich stuff to work with. It is a fantasy story, and I'm going to refer to it on this channel as the Dragon Book. That right now is the story that I'm working on the most, and I've actually done a fair bit of outlining, and I'll do another video about that. I have a new approach to my outlining process, or at least a new format for it. It'll make sense when you see the video. And then I'll do a different video about the actual outlining process for the Dragon Book, because it went really well. So that's what I'm working on right now. I am working on the Dragon Book, and I'm not sure when I'm gonna start writing that. I have, you know, a lot going on. But I do know, and whether it's the Dragon Book or something else, I do know that this year, 2022, I'm gonna do NaNoWriMo, and I'm gonna succeed. See, I have not successfully accomplished a NaNoWriMo ever. Oh, don't get me wrong, the first time I wrote the superhero story, I did write 50,000 words in 30 days. But I didn't do all those 30 days in November. I did them in November and December and April and June. The last couple of years I've attempted a NaNoWriMo, it has not gone especially well. But this year, I'm gonna take it seriously, I'm gonna do it right, and I'm going to write 50,000 words in 30 days. I think I can. I actually think that I'm capable of doing it. I just need to plan ahead and actually prepare for NaNoWriMo and take the prep of Preptober a little bit more seriously. So that is my goal for the year. I'll probably do some more writing in between now and then. Again, if I don't end up doing the Dragon novel in between, then that'll be the story that I write in November. But I hope to have a few more actual writing updates on this channel, because that was the main reason that I stopped doing videos. But again, that's a topic for a separate video. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you are interested and engaged and willing to follow along with me as I go on the journey of writing. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this, hit the like button and subscribe and do all the YouTube things. I trust you. I think you know what to do. Thank you so much for watching. And even though it's been more than 6 months, I am so happy to say that I am married to Victoria Christensen. I love you, Victoria.